All right, so hello everyone. So today we're gonna look at some more example on Node.js and then talk about APIs. So one example that I wasn't able to show you last time from the rock, paper, scissors example. So I don't know if you remember this. So this is basically a rock, paper, scissors example where I was able to send one of rock, paper, scissors, and then server will respond back with one of these. So let's just to remind you, let's run this guy. So I'm gonna go to my documents, the folder, to everyone by now is familiar with the node command. So it's running this localhost in 3744, and obviously I would have to specify the demo.html. The reason why, I have to specify is that, if this was index.html, I would have been fine. So let me actually change it to index. So if I get rid of it, because default routing will look for index.html, so it's working. So if I type something, hey, it's not gonna respond because server does not like that particular parameter that we specified. So it's going to look for, it's going to give you a message, it says, hey, is this a bad request? And then I need to send either rock, paper, or scissors. So if I say rock, and it's going to give me one of these choices. And then we did get and post last time. So today what I'm going to show you is to another way to get parameters as part of URL. So one thing that Express is doing is going to be, like getting an endpoint, and then you can specify a certain parameter as part of the URL. So let me just grab this guy. So let me create a very simple, kind of weird endpoint. So let's kind of get rid of this guy. So what I'm gonna do is add, which is basically if I pass two numbers to a server, the server will respond back with the sum of these two numbers. So, why would I want that? I don't really know, but this is an example. Imagine that, some sort of database function that needs to be done in the server. So, like you might have seen, one way to obviously, let's create a very simple add endpoint. Log and add request received, and let's write a simple successful command. We can use this sort of thing. So 200, it's gonna be application.json, and then I'm gonna end with answer is success. Let's see if this guy works. So an index file, I'm going to create another button. Let's create two more input and then name it num1 num2, and then let's give the same ID. And then this button is going to be add two button, add two numbers. And then let's have another response placeholder here, add response. Okay, so what I'm going to do here in the jQuery, so this is document ready function that we looked at, and then I'm going to just create an event handler for this particular function. So it's going to be add click function and simply debugger for now. So let's refresh this guy, but also I would have to restart the server. It does not have any error. You don't have to worry about these errors because I think the error is coming from the my plugin, like Chrome extension. So if I run it in the incognito mode, I don't think it's going to have the same kind of error because incognito mode does not have any Chrome extension. So if I click it, it's just going to call this debugger. And here what we want to do is make a Ajax call. So I'm going to copy this guy. And RPS. So now it's going to be add. And then I'm not sending any data at the moment. But I'm probably going to have a successful callback for now. And then put debugger. It's okay to keep this. So if I put add, it's gonna error empty response. So there's some error in the server side. Success is not defined. So I have an error at 64, line 64. So if I go to server, I don't know why I did that. Like, let's put string and then refresh the server. And if I add, I get the same error. The reason why it gives me an error is that it can only take a string as buffer. So I would have to stringify. Stringify this particular object, whereas like here I didn't have to because send was going to take care of all this. So let me make a request again. And I get the same object from the server, which is good. So here what I'm going to do is send parameter as part of URL. So here what I can do is I can specify some parameters. So here I'm going to expect a URL that is going to that is specified delimited by /. So and then the first one is going to be num1, and then you need this colon to be able to use indicate that this is going to be a parameter that it is expecting from the client machine. And the second one will be num2. So here, what I can do is I can access this guy with this request.params. So that's this guy. So I'm running the server again. If I just make a request, and then it cannot find, because now the endpoint is different. Endpoint is not add anymore. It is add and slash and one number and the another number. So I would have to make the call to the right endpoint in the client side. So here, I'm going to make a call to something like this. So if I refresh, it succeeded. And then if I go back to server, what it received is this object. So now you can see that it is a complete URL, and then it's going to, I can actually embed parameters as part of URL. So let's, instead of 2 and 3, let's actually send the data coming from the value of input. So here I'm gonna say placeholder is number 1, and this would have been number 2. So I have this placeholder text, which is gonna go away if I type something. And then when I send something, this is gonna be the value that I get from this input. So here, instead of this guy, I'm gonna concatenate string from num1 val, and then instead of 3, and I'm gonna get the value of num2. So if I send 3 and 4, now server is gonna get 3 and 4. I send 6 and 7, the server is gonna get 6 and 7. So what I would have to send is simply the sum of these two. So let's, instead of success, let's access this each parameter and then send it as an answer. Oh, I would have to restart the server. So 3 and 4. Now I got 34, obviously, because it's I think it's a string, so it concatenated. So the parameter that was received is recognized as a string, so we would have to parse it as a number. So how would I parse it? Parse string to number, JavaScript. There's gonna be some function. Parse int is a function, and then it looks like it's gonna work only when it is an integer, but we want something, it could have been it could have been float number, so I would use parse float. So let's see if this is existing function. Parse float. Yeah, so it's going to, okay. Return value a number. If the first character cannot be converted into a number, nan is return. Okay, that's good. So we can even do some sort of error checking. I would have to restart the server. So it's 23, 23, 4. If I add, I'm going to get 47. Yeah. So the cool thing about this is that now I can actually use the URL and then put parameter as part of URL is actually sending your like parameter, and which is simpler than query string. So before, a thing that I had to do is like this sort of thing. Num1 is equal to 23, and num2 is equal to 30, 24. And then instead of that, I could simply do, I mean, I would have to do something like this. Add. So instead of this, I can simply do 23, 25. So if I actually make a call to this, I'm gonna get this JSON. And then, yeah, and then actually this is kind of like a URL that you can share with anybody, right? So much simpler than query string. So imagine that this could, like right now I'm giving you an example, but it could be something else, like, let's say it's fetching data, and then like one endpoint is customer, and then next parameter could be maybe a screen, like the ID of the customer. So it could be Sangwon Lee, and then it's gonna return the information about that particular customer. So this is a good way to actually use the URL and then still send parameters, and then let the Express router deal with this customizable URL endpoints. So add, and like it is expecting 2 more parameter delimited by slash. And then this could be anything, like could be customer, maybe name, and delete task name, maybe search keywords, like anything. So this I like this. I wanted to show you this like additional function of this Express router, where you can specify endpoint that expects particular parameters. We didn't really use this in our example case, but like this could have been useful. Like, for example, like if it was something like delete and task ID, and then you could possibly use this as a way to actually delete the thing, delete the certain task by ID. Okay, so let's actually finish this. So one thing that we wanted to do is update this guy. HTML, and then say the answer is data.answer. I'm not doing any checking, sanity check. Like probably I should have done some sanity check in the server side, but I am not doing that just for the sake of time. Okay, so, and I would love to have this period at the end. So let's refresh the page. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus 6 is 9. 90 is 93. So again, well, this is, this is not a good example to highlight the needs of the server, but you can imagine that this could have been anything. This could have been like searching something from the database. Maybe you want to hide some logic in server so that client script does not have to reveal the code to the hackers, so yeah, I mean, this is basically one example where I can, I use the Express router to include parameters as of in its endpoint. Okay, so that's the example that I wanted to show. And today, what I'm going to talk about is this using external API. So one thing that I should have told you is that same origin policy. So right now in assignment 4, in your JavaScript, like in the client side JavaScript, you can make a request to the server, but like it cannot really make request to another server. For example, like it has to be the same, like the client URL is localhost colon 8081, and it can only make a request to localhost colon 8081. So it cannot make requests to some other server, like for example, like Google or something. So this is because this same origin policy, and most browsers enforce same origin policy, means that JavaScript can only access DOMs of pages within same origin, and these AJAX call HTTP requests can only run on pages within the same origin. So protocol meaning HTTP. So for example, let's actually try something. So here I'm making, this is something else. Here I'm making request to add, but let's say HTTP localhost. So it was 3744. So this works because it's exactly the same, right? But if I change the protocol, so HTTPS is like a secured protocol. So if I do that, oh, it still works. Interesting. Oh, obviously I did not refresh the page. Now it's going to give an error. And then let's go to server side. Server side didn't even get it. And then we can make a random request to, I don't know. Let's make this. So it's going to complain about, hey, access to this request at this particular address from origin, like because these two are different, it's been blocked by CORS policy. So google.com does not allow any request that is something other than google.com, obviously. So that is basically the same origin policy. How can I get my slides? Okay, so this is a good thing actually. This is because of the security measure and prevents cross-site scripting attacks. Like for example, imagine that I create a for loop that makes an infinite Ajax code to some server. That means that, like, you know, it's kind of like a attack, right? Like I could possibly make the server down with like infinite requests. And the other way to go, or other way to think about it is that imagine that you downloaded a website, like, you know, you went to a website, and imagine that website can actually read something from your local machine. So that's kind of weird, right? Like, you know, like website has access to your local files that like should not be allowed, right? So this is for a security measure, but we want to be able to use some other products such as Twitter, YouTube, or Google. So like to have that, we would have to use CORS, which means a cross-origin resource sharing. It's basically a mechanism that uses an additional HTTP header to let a user gain permission to access certain resources from a server from different origins. So imagine there's an HTML file and like one image is coming from its own web server, but imagine it's using another image that needs to be drawn in Canvas. So Canvas on, like, image on Canvas needs to be loaded by JavaScript file, and then you could get a like image from other web server. So this is basically CORS, and this is same origin. But you know, obviously, like image or static files are not necessarily so they're two different things. So this server needs to allow CORS, like, you know, this server needs to allow a request from different origin. Maybe they can control, they have control over which website that they are going to allow from, or they can allow from everywhere, for example. But like this is kind of static file, but like what if I want to get the data? This is where API is going to be useful. So API, I don't remember if you're, I'm not sure if you remember this, but we talked about this difference between API and library and framework. Basically, library is something like jQuery, where you include like kind of like a library of helper function that you can use to abstract certain you know, functions, and you can include in your own website, right? Framework is basically a platform that you built upon, like built your app upon. So it's like, you know, it's going to define the structure of your app, and you have to follow the basically like architecture of the app that it is defining. API is basically something, you know, to be able to communicate with other external services, like, you know, it could be Twitter, Google Maps, YouTube, whatever product that exists today, or whatever online web service. So it's like, you know, like if this was, imagine, oops, let me try to draw. So imagine this is kind of like your assignment 4. So this is server.js. And then this is index.html, and the index.html has index.js file. And then it was able to make a request to the server and then send you responses, and which is kind of like a task items. But what if I want to get, I don't know, temperature of the city that I'm living in, for example? Or what if I want to get a zip code of the address that I typed? And obviously my web server does not have that information. Obviously, if I want to have that information, it's going to be pretty closely to have that function. What if it's something that other product has? Like, what if I want to get my profile photo in my Facebook account? So I would have to make a request to Facebook and then get the data. So in that case, we use API. So this is basically some other type of service. Basically, it's the same as Ajax code. Like you're making the request and then you're giving the response back. API is going to give you the response, and the API will have to allow CORS requests, which is basically getting requests from a server that is other than the origin, so localhost can make a request to twitter.com, and it's kind of their jobs to take care of this CORS policy. Okay, so API stands for Application Programming Interfaces. It's just a way to interact with other products or services. And this means that the product that provides APIs will open their data and functionality to other developers. So it's not just about fetching data, but it can possibly upload or post data. Why companies make APIs? Because they want to let users create new products out of their APIs, and it's gonna increase traffic, and then it's gonna invite people to come to their website, and it's relevant to sales. So this is a huge deal if you get a job in any sort of tech company these days. Anybody will have API, and then with standalone app, they cannot really survive. It's connecting different apps to expand their services. So you need to follow the specification. So it's kind of like what you did in assignment 4. Even though I didn't really specify any good documentation for server.js, typically what you would have expected for using API is that you would have to go to the website, go to the service, and then they will provide documentation for the API that you have to use. And then it's very similar to assignment 4. It's going to have some endpoint. It's going to have some response. You would have to provide some parameters, and you would have to understand what kind of responses are coming back. So typically you need API keys. There were some days that we were able to use API without any API keys back in the days where there are not many people who were using API, and then everyone's starting to create API. But, because people can abuse API. You can make infinite number of calls to Twitter, and then possibly maybe Twitter will take care of have to take care of this network traffic that is malicious in some sort. So these days, mostly, not necessarily all the APIs, but mostly they have to, a user need to create API key in their developer console. And the API key is typically tied to one application or one project, not necessarily to one individual account. So when API key is created and it's typically associated with a project, and then they're gonna using this API key, the companies will keep track of network traffic and number of amount of usage, so that you can see they can have in control. They can have your app in control. So API key typically looks like this randomly generated string. I don't know if you can see this, but this is kind of what it looks like. Oops. Yeah, so something like this. Well, obviously this is like something, this is not real API, so so what's next? You have to protect your API keys. So it's kind of like a password for your app. And then if other people knows your API key, it means that they are able to use your, your API. And then sometimes API is tied to your credit card number. So like if some people use a lot, like it's going to charge you, the company is going to charge you. And, or sometimes like some companies have like free plan, but if like someone else use your API, you will not have leftovers so that you cannot really use it. Best practice is to actually restrict the key, like restrict the usage of the API key. So maybe only your website can make a request to the particular website. For example, like let's say YouTube, and then let's say only the URL that you made is going to be able to use this particular API token, for example. The other way to go is like, you probably do not want to include your key inside the JavaScript of the client side, because it means that that string token will be visible to any users. Although, I mean, this is, if you restrict your source, like when you restrict your API by IP address, like or web server URL, this is going to be a less of a problem. The other way to go is like making API calls in the server. So instead of making API calls in the client, like in the web browser, maybe API calls could be done inside the server, maybe every other day, so that you don't really have to get, like, for example, let's say temperature of 100 United States cities, and instead of and then let's say you have millions of users that use your app, and then instead of letting millions of users to make an AJAX call to weather.com API, if there is such a thing, probably there is. Instead of that, maybe you want to create kind of like a periodic, like repetitive AJAX call inside the Node.js server program that you build, and maybe it's going to make a call every 1 hour, so that you are limiting the number of calls that you make to the server. All right, so there's some etiquette that you have to follow, like avoid hammering external servers. Typically these days they will probably be fine, because like as many as you, as like you would have to pay for as much as you use, and then typically they have some limit in terms of requests per second. And note any usage limit, and follow any rules or requests specified by API host. And the consequences is like for them, it's like their bandwidth, like network traffic, and then service delay and downtime. Your consequences will be, basically, hey, the amount of like, calls that you can use for free is like limited, so you would have to pay from a certain point. So let's have a look at one API, for example. So let's go to Twitter API rate limiting. So here they say they are using 15-minute window, and they can have 15 calls every 15 minutes. So, and then response code will have like these properties, like so that it's going to tell you the rate limits ceiling for the given endpoint, a number of requests left for this particular 15-minute window, and the remaining window before the rate limit resets. And then if you go over this limit, it's going to return with this 429 status code that says too many requests. And so I think this is a standard API endpoints, which is free version of it, of Twitter. But they have premium APIs where they can, let me actually check this, guys. So this is like an endpoint that they can use. For this particular endpoint, you can make 180 requests. And then like sometimes it's like different when you want to post tweet using API, like the number of requests, like, you know, the amount of like, you know, rate is going to be different per each action. So let's look at this guy, like let's look at the pricing. So Twitter has 3 tiers: standard, premium, enterprise. Standard is free. And then you can only search the last 7 days of tweets. Premium can let you search the full archive. So how much is it? This does not tell you how much it is. Products. It's not exactly telling you how much it is. Maybe pricing. Interesting. Let's look at something else. How about Vimeo? Oops. For some reason, my keyboard and mouse stopped. Hopefully it's going to come back. Okay. So Vimeo API pricing. Started. I don't want to log in. Oh, okay. Let's actually move on, and because we're going to look at the other example. Let's just keep moving on. So you might have heard something like RESTful API, RESTful or REST API, or RESTful services. So basically, it stands for representational state transfer. It simply means that it will send the representational state of an object instead of the object itself. So what is the representational state? Is like, you know, like something object that is like, you know, presented in a form like JSON or XML format. So like what we have been doing in, you know, assignment 4 is kind of RESTful because it's like, you know, sending certain data as a form of JSON or XML. So nothing, you know, too different from what we know already. There, like, you know, back in the days, there's a thing called SOAP API. which is basically you would have to follow the protocol, whereas here you just need to send like JSON object or XML JSON, string or XML string to the server, and then you would expect JSON and XML. So for the rest of the class, I'm going to show you some YouTube API example and show some live coding. So YouTube API demo. So obviously, like there are a lot of like products that use YouTube, right? Like for example, I don't know, like so YouTube API app examples. Sample applications, something like video wall in Android. Like so API could be used by any, not just by a web app, it could be used by anything. It could be used by like Android app, iOS app. So let's say certain iOS app, like in even though it's not YouTube app, like you can actually play YouTube video inside it. Inside of it, like it means that it's using YouTube API. So let's actually check out the Spotify API apps because they have a developer showcase. So these are kind of like apps that use Spotify APIs. So let's do some example. So what are these? Search Spotify using an image, show an album cover. Playlist shuffle allows you to shuffle all your playlist. 6 degrees of Kanye West. Let's see what it does. Website. So how close is your favorite artist to Kanye West is probably something that this app does. So let's write down some artist name. How about Adele? If I search it, and it's going to give you how Adele is relevant to Kanye West. And then I guess these are some of the artists that are relevant to Adele. Yeah, maybe they had the same album. So maybe they collaborated or they did some duet, and that's how you create this 6 degrees to Kanye West. Okay, so I think it's using Spotify API. What else do we have? Let's look at this guy. So it looks like it has a lot of genres. Okay, so what I do? Find artists, like let's say Kanye West. So it belongs to Chicago rap or rap. So let's look at where it is. Oh, and then it's going to show you a bunch of other artists that belongs to this particular genre. And then if I click one of those, you can really hear it, but like I think it is playing. Yeah. And if you can. Okay. Hopefully you can hear what it's doing. Okay. So yeah, this is using Spotify API. Let's see. Miami hip hop. Oh, it's gonna actually play that some random songs in that genre. Okay, pretty cool. And I can go in and see what kind of artists they have. Okay, anyway, I'm having too much fun here. So this is kind of like what you can do. Like you can actually, you don't have to have all kind of data. Like, let's say you want to provide some Twitter that are relevant to certain keywords. You want to provide some music app, like you can actually use other services to retrieve data and then provide something. So what I was going to do is show you YouTube API, YouTube data API, and then again, the very important thing is to be able to figure out their the specification. So like typically they have references or documentation calling the API. So let's go to search. So one of the cool thing in this YouTube data API they have this API console where you can actually make Ajax call in this web browser. So this is like a search API, search endpoint. It returns a collection of search results that match the query parameters specified in the API request. So these are the parameters that it is expecting. So there's a lot, obviously. And then once you, this is the only thing that is required. And then you would have to kind of read their documentation to see what it is. So first parameter, the required parameter, port. The port parameters specify a comma-separated list of one or more search resource properties that API response will include. Set the parameter value to snippet. Okay, let's set it to snippet. And then all the others are optional. So let's execute it. And then this particular thing is expecting API key. So let me actually use this guy. And then it's gonna give me the result. So the result is presented in JSON. There's a lot of, this is pretty long, return like response. So it's hard to see what's inside. So whenever I have long JSON format, I typically use like online website that can translate JSON to table. There are a lot of websites like, but JSON to table is one of them. So I just copy the JSON and then place this, and it's gonna give me a nice table-like thing. Or you can actually use this to expand and collapse each object. So what kind of search result did I get? So it has page info, total result, result per page, and I only have 5 items at the moment, but this could be the total result. So probably it's going to have result for the next page. But let's see what each item has. It's each video and video ID and thumbnail, URL to the thumbnail. So let's look at this guy, and then title, and so let's grab this and then see what it is. And this is the thumbnail of the video. And then what was the video ID? So this is the ID of this particular video. So let's see what it is. Okay, so some random YouTube video that came as a result. The one thing that we didn't do is typing the search keywords. So let's look at this. What kind of parameter is for search keywords? So let's check out each of them. For content owner, for developer, for mine, optional parameters, channel ID, event type. So you can probably, if you provide channel ID, it means that you're going to search within a certain channel. Max result. So maybe a max result could be 3, so that I can only exactly 3. Order, how this search result will be ordered. Default value is relevance, but I'm gonna use rating instead of relevance. Q parameter specify the query term that search for. So probably this is the thing that I can use. So let's say, what should I do? Funny video, funny cats. So if I execute it, and I get this nice JSON. And then let's go back to the JSON to table. It's hard to see, but basically I think a return of exactly 3 because we specified 3. So 1, 2, 3, and then it has video ID. Then you can see when it was published, Funny Cat TikTok compilation number 2, and let's check out the thumbnail. So this is the thumbnail for the video, and then this is where is the video ID? This is the video ID. So let's check out the video. Okay, so this is actually Funny cat video. Okay, so you can imagine that you could make an app like remember the very first assignment where you are asked to create like a YouTube jukebox, and obviously you can, I mean, you can actually create it like if you want to create like YouTube jukebox, you can create your own API token and then make a search, make a search request to the YouTube data API, and it's going to come back with the responses, and then you can actually even like not just even video ID, but you can also like control this video. So one other example that I can show you is my own website. Is livecodingyoutube.github, livecodingyoutube.github.io. So it's basically manipulating YouTube video. So I can, this is like video ID, but I can create like a grid of YouTube video. So I'm creating 2x2, and I can play them all.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do you
pause them all at the same time, play the first one and the last one.
What would it mean for the wider?
Or make a loop. And then yeah, this is kind of crazy, but basically what I'm doing is, using API, I am adding like kind of creating music with this YouTube video, like DJing, kind of like a DJing remix of YouTube video to create music. So this is one app that I made, but like, obviously I'm using their API. I don't know anything about, I mean, my server does not have all this data. I'm retrieving data from YouTube and then actually play these video to create kind of like a some contemporary music on stage. So if you're interested in, like, there's some, I mean, even I have some documentation for this. There's some, like, web page on my website on this particular project, so feel free to check it out. So the tricky thing about this YouTube data API is that you need to type your credit card number to create an API key. So like one thing that I wanted to do for this class was that actually create, like, make this YouTube jukebox that we designed in the as a first assignment, but then YouTube data API, it's like not, well, it's free. They give you some free amount that you can use, but then like to get free account, like then you need to enter your credit card number, which I don't think I can do that for you guys. So I wasn't able to actually create an assignment with YouTube data API. So instead, what I'm going to show you is, like, use something else that is free, and then show you some good example. I mean, like, how to use API in our own case. So what I'm going to use is like this assignment 3. So assignment 3, so let's open it. So this is basically what assignment 3. It does what it's supposed to do, like, hello, find toilet paper, and then submit it, and it's going to create the new task. And so this is assignment 3 HTML file and then key JavaScript file. So here, imagine that I'm going to add like an animated GIF for this particular task that I added. and then what's a good website for animated GIF. So I don't know if you know, but there's a website called Giphy.com, which is basically search engine for animated GIF. So you can search anything like, something about toilet paper. It's going to return lots of GIF related to that term. But like I said, any kind of website or web apps these days have their API. So let's see if Giphy has API. Obviously, I checked this already. Giphy developers. So get started. And then it has SDK and API. So SDK is, more advanced one, and API is simply making a AJAX call to the server. And then you can see what kind of API endpoints that has. It has search endpoint, and it's going to give you URL, and then it will specify the parameter that you have to specify. So these are required, and it requires API key. And then these are optional. And then the successful response is going to come with these three, return three object, data, pagination, and meta. Another endpoint, trending, translate, random, and then it has its own endpoint, right? Like we do in assignment 4, and so forth. So what I'm going to do is, why don't I just use search endpoint to find the most relevant animated GIF for this particular to-do item based on this title. So let's try this. I would have to create a API key. So I will first create an app, and then I would have to pick one or the other, but I'm going to use API. My app's name is going to be 3744 to-do list. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to retrieve animated GIF that are relevant to my to-do items. I'm going to agree to the terms that come term API terms and create API, and then it's going to give me this API call, API token, API key, and then let's create another tab. So here, what should I do? Let's go to this key. And what I'm going to do is, whenever someone click the new task, I'm going to create a search animated, search that keyword, using the title as a keyword, and then maybe use the very first animated GIF that is returned, and then add that inside the note. So how do I make a call? So this is a good place to make a call. So I don't know if you remember, once the button is submitted, it's going to call this callback function, and it's going to check the title, due date, and note, and then it adds one item inside the task, and then initialize the model window, and then render task again. And then maybe this is a good place to call the function. So I'm going to call get. The first URL is going to be the endpoint, which is search endpoint. It's going to be this guy. So, and if I have to put HTTP, but what kind of parameter it requires? It requires API key and queue, and I would have to provide my API key, and hopefully they will have some code example. Code example is here, so if I go here, they provide lots of different code example depending on the language, and obviously because this is RESTful API, even though, like, you know, it's the format that I think they're going to use JSON, like look at the JSON, but like you can like typically a lot of different program language has JSON parser, or JSON like serialization or deserialization. So JSON could be used by any other language. So I'm going to use JavaScript. Nicely, it's using jQuery. So I'm going to grab this to thing. So it's making a request to this particular URL, and it's providing parameter. This is the endpoint, right, that we saw. Again, this is the endpoint, right? api.jiffy.com /v1 gifs search. So you can see that exactly the same. And then they added this query string at the end. So Q is equal to Ryan plus Gosling, and API key needs to be something that I have provide, like something that I have to provide to the. Again, it's not really good practice to include my API key in my client code, but you know, this is just for demo, and I'm gonna delete this API key after this class, so you cannot really use this. And then limit is equal to 5. And what does it mean by limit? If you go to endpoint, limit is basically the maximum number of objects to return. So default is 25, but I'm just going to get 5. So it is using done function like we saw. So, but we're going to do in the way that I demonstrated. Done, and then grab this guy. Success got data, and then let's put debugger here. Just to stop the program. So the error is coming from the extension, so I'm gonna actually run it in the incognito mode. So it's gonna happen when we add a task. So test, if I add it, we got the debugger, and then we got the data. So we got the data from the Giphy.com, and it has 3 property. One is data, next one is pagination, and next one is meta. Meta is like, you know, it contains like the status of the request, message okay, response ID, and so forth. So let's look at the data. Data is probably the one that we're interested in. So first, they have 5 elements. Let's look at the first element. The type is GIF. ID is this. URL is this guy. So let's look at this guy. And then I don't know if you remember, but like the search keyword was Ryan Gosling. I don't know why they used this as an example. And yes, this is the animated GIF that I got, which is not really appropriate for this class, but I guess that's okay. And then it sends you a bunch of different other data about this particular GIF. So what is bit.ly GIF URL is probably the shorthand version of it. Another shorthand version of it. So if I grab this guy and then paste it, it's going to go exactly to the page that we saw. A source, where this animated GIF is coming from. Source post URL. Is it sticker? 0 means that it is not a sticker. Import date time when it was imported. Trending date time. It looks like it was never trended. And images. And it has a bunch of images. Oh wow. So maybe I could look at this particular thing, like it's a downsize, large, and then it gives a URL, and then it's basically actually the URL to this animated GIF. So we would have to actually, instead of Ryan Gosling, we would have to look for the title, like, search the title that we entered. So here is the Ryan Gosling. We would have to use this guy title. And let's see what it does. So I'm going to refresh the page, add a task. What would I type? How about, again, maybe coronavirus? Definitely not a task, but just for the sake of testing the API call. Let's look at this. I got 5 data, and it gave me some interesting URL. Let's look at the short one. It's kind of scary because of this name. Okay, cool. So it is an animated GIF about coronavirus. Interesting. Maybe it is trending. Image. And you can get the image actually. So what do we want to do with this? Like, let's say we want to do is when you put note, you're going to put you want to actually add this image under this title. So what I'm going to do is I would have to locate this particular image URL. So it's going to be data 0. So I'm going to always use the first item, and then I would have to go to images, and let's do downsize large and URL. So data so let me actually stop it here one more time. Let's do something else. Toilet paper. Oh, toilet paper submit. And then we stopped here. So I'm gonna say hey data, and data, like I happen to name the first parameter as data, but actually none of the property is data. So it's kind of a coincidence. And then first item, and then images, and then downsize large dot URL is gonna give me the link to animated GIF about this toilet paper. Pretty cool. So what I'm gonna do is grab this guy, and then I will add this animated GIF under the note. So here this is the point where I have the data. So I'm just gonna assume that I have the right URL. URL is gonna be this guy. And then what do? How would I add an image? So I would have to find right selector. So interesting. It's kind of difficult, but I'm probably gonna change my render.html to create a space for that particular thing. So here it's specifying the title and it's specifying the note. So here I'm gonna have one more div and then say ID is GIF dash, and then I'm gonna use task ID. And here I'm gonna put nothing. So now I'm gonna have, kind of like a div placeholder for this animated GIF. And then the ID of the div element is gonna be GIF dash task ID, which is gonna be integer. So once I get the data, I'm gonna select GIF dash. Now I have to know the index because this is the most recent one. Probably it's gonna be task length -1. So because the index starts from 0, like if I have 5 elements, the last index will be 4, like because starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then set the HTML to be, I'm gonna set image src, and then the source of image will be this guy. Okay, so let's see. Add task. Let's go with the toilet paper. Find toilet paper. Submit. Let's check here. And then proceed. Let's check out the URL. And then let's see what we got. We got this nice animated GIF. And hopefully it added something. So if I look at the notes, nothing interesting. Okay, let me try that again. Test. Okay, here. Oh, okay, it's not working. Let's check out this guy. Let's check out this guy. This is 5, and then task has 5 elements, right? 6 elements for sure. And then let's see if I can select this GIF dash 5. Interesting. So let's look at the elements. Main table T body and 5. It should have, okay. This was the reason why it was not working. It should have had this inside this quotation, double quotation. So now it's going to work. Test, submit, yes. And then now this is going to return an HTML element. Yes. Hopefully now it has something. No. Okay. So it looks like there's something wrong with the escaping URL. So let me try again. Test. So let's look at the URL. Okay. So the reason why it is not working is, I think, it is because, so I'm unnecessarily debugging this on the fly. So let me actually, maybe this was one of the reasons. So let's look at this guy. Looks about right. If I grab this guy one more time, and then let's see what's inside. .html. Okay, so now it has something. Oh, cool. So yeah, so it took me a while to actually build this. I didn't obviously rehearse it. I was doing this on the fly. So if I create a random task, pick up mom from airport, and I'll say due date is this, and then type something. If I submit it, I don't need this breakpoint anymore. Now it's going to add like random animated GIF from this Jiffy.com API, which is pretty cool, And obviously I could do something like, maybe I can, maybe you can give, like I can provide like 5 different images so that I can choose one from 5. Let's do something else. Wash Do the laundry. Submit. Oh, okay. So obviously I cannot control everything because I'm just doing this randomly. What else? Virginia Tech. If I do this. Okay, so this is a basically example of me creating, not creating, using Jiffy.com API to add like a random animated GIF to assignment 3. Obviously, the existing one does not have these because these were generated from from the initial code run. So what if I do this? I have no idea why I get these kind of random animated GIF, but obviously it's pretty fun to do this. Okay. All right, so I think, so that's all I wanted to show you today. Basically, the stuff that we did today is using, being able to use the API. So we use Jiffy.com API to retrieve animated GIF, search animated GIF based on the keywords that we provide. And then what I'm gonna do is actually delete this app so that my API key is not revealed to you guys, obviously, but you can test these. And then once I delete the app, let's see if it's still gonna work. COVID-19, if I submit it, now it's gonna complain because it's forbidden. And then if I look at more detail, if I actually put fail function and print out object response text, COVID-19, and it's going to tell you about, hey, invalid authentication credentials. So because I just deleted the API token, so I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. Okay, so I think that was it for today. I, again, have no idea how much time I spent, but I think I have a feeling that I spent too long time. I'm probably going to spend less time next lecture, just for making up your time. So yeah, good luck with your assignment 4, and then next time I think we're gonna go into React and some advanced framework, and we only have 3 weeks left, so we don't have too much time to cover all this, all the stuff that we wanted to cover, but I think I think I'll be able to cover all the things that we wanted to cover, advanced framework. And if you have some time, we're gonna look at some graphics or more advanced GUI programming topics towards the end. Okay, I'll see you guys on Thursday.